Deepak, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you, Jason. It's much appreciated and it's a privilege to be here.
You're welcome, welcome, and we're glad to have you. And I'm gonna hop off here real quick, but I wanna just say we've been partners with TCS for a number of years, and your teams at TCS bring so much experience and so much knowledge and consultancy. I highly encourage all of the folks on today's call. If you have a need around Industry 4.0, if you have a need around Creatio low code, TCS is one of our best partners that we have out there. So without further ado, Mr. Deepak Mahavatur, thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much, Jason. And then good morning and then good afternoon, audience. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I think you guys, hopefully you're seeing my screen. Let me go to the presentation mode. So the area that we're going to discuss today, and then I'm going to share my perspective on the future of supply chain in the uncertain world, right? I'm sure every word of that probably should be very familiar to all of you in the sense uncertainty probably we all are living through the last, I don't know, couple of years, or at least as we see in the newspaper and the TV and then in the different speeches. But the supply chain and uncertainty probably goes hand in hand for many years before the pandemic hit, right? And how exactly that uncertainty is applied in the context of manufacturing, right? So that's what we're going to say, and then we're going to discuss today. And before we go and then see how the future would look like, and here's a disclaimer. In the last couple of years, there are multiple times I have spoken in different conferences, I have made predictions. I'm humble to say more than 60% of my predictions are wrong. Right? So supply chain seems to be throwing curveballs at every other instance. It could be due to various reasons, something that we kind of anticipated, something that we did not have a clue. The one thing that it has resulted in all of these, thanks to the so much of hype around supply chain is at least now my mother knows what exactly I do. For the last 20 years, she didn't know what I was doing. And now she is very clear that I do supply chain and I'm one of the root causes for all the problems, right? So before we go into how the future would look like, or at least from our perspective, first I want to kind of spend a couple of minutes in what's going on in the manufacturing industry in the context of supply chain, and more importantly, what will happen. Because both of these questions, I'm sure you would agree, that needs to be understood or at least establish some sort of a reference point so that we decide how the future could look like or how we envision the future of the supply chain as it applies to the manufacturing industry. And I've got a couple of these, the images, right? One, in the last 24 months, we've all been impacted by pandemic in various ways, right? From a business perspective. And once we think that we have done this multiple times. We solve the pandemic version this, something else pop up. Solve that, something else pop up. Climate conditions, sustainability issues continues to go haywire. We all are seeing where things are heading, which means that adds a level of complexity to everything that we do. And every other day, you will be hearing the breaking news. Oh my God, big news, which adds to enough tension to already complex world. The last but not the least is there are certain activities that we never anticipated, correct? Such as the war, the trade wars, and the real war. Each one of them is adding some unprecedented complexities and uncertainties to supply chain. So in summary, because of all of these events that we are reading and we know, and there are many events that are very localized, which we don't necessarily read, but what it is doing to overall to the supply chain is creating a lot of uncertainties, creating a lot of issues with the capacity, significant demand changes and the volatility, some good, some bad, translating into raw materials not being available at the place it is required, at the time it is required. And now the labor shortages significantly impacting both the inbound and then outbound transportation as well as in operations. Then last but not the least is inflation, because all of this is going to translate back into the demand that we're going to see in the next couple of quarters. Now, if this would have been a story of the past, then we can assume, and we don't have to worry about the future of the supply chain. Whatever it was, it's going to get back to the normalcy. Then I think we all will be fine. And which is one of those questions that we need to ask ourselves. Do we believe all of these actions and the activities that we have seen in the last 24 to 36 months, is it going to go away? Or is it going to continue to happen in some fashion and some form? And my prediction, and from our organization, we believe the exact events may not happen, but some dimensions of these events will continue to happen. The extent of these events are going to vary, but these type of uncertainties will happen. So if that is going to happen, then what is that everybody is going to be clamoring from a supply chain perspective, right? Because you saw in the previous slide, there are various events that we said, if we need to address, everybody is saying that, yep, supply chain must achieve visibility. Supply chain must achieve transparency, agility. It should be flexible. And of course, it should be resilient, right? So that means we all have figured out what it needs, right? How our supply chain characteristics should be. So now the next logical question is, if we all know, then that means we have a very clear idea of how the future of supply chain is going to be. And we all know how exactly to execute this, right? That means we have a solution, but not so fast, right? At least based on what we are seeing, and I'm giving you this as a practitioner's view. Every other day when I go in front of my customers and internally when we do research, there are things that what we are seeing, which is what everybody wants to achieve, and then what is happening, there is a significant gap. And when we spend some time in terms of why exactly this struggle is, knowing very well what we need to achieve from a supply chain, from a future perspective, to address some of these uncertainties, challenges that are happening in the manufacturing industry, I could summarize all of this into kind of a one. I believe, and I could be wrong here, but this is my hypothesis, it's an efficiency versus resiliency battle. If you kind of remember, right, most of, and then my past background, I've spent my first part of my career with different manufacturing firms, managing and running their supply chain and operations, planning, the procurement, the logistics, the stores, inventory, and name it, and then be on the line. So during all of those years, the extensive function of supply chain was always to make sure we deliver everything at the minimum cost, which is kind of an efficiency play, just in time, lean, each, and applied with theory of constraints. Each one of them are basically intended to make sure we become very, very efficient from the supply chain angle perspective. Now the question is, have we driven these concepts, which were absolutely great concepts? The question is, are they still applicable in its entirety today? Or have they introduced a significant amount of brittleness in the entire value chain? What do I mean by that, right? And we've all seen in the last 24 months, even though it happened previously as well, but I'm going to stick to the last 24 months because pretty much everybody, whether you are in the supply chain area or not, everybody got impacted. Everybody has a better understanding. Because we focused extensively on lean, we extensively focused on just in time with this global network across the world. Maybe we have introduced enough brittleness that one pressure point is going to break the entire thing, and we all start scrambling. Another question from as part of my hypothesis is, we have always been focusing extensively to reduce my material cost, right? In 50% of the COGS is made up of give or take material cost. So if I bring that down, certainly my margin is going to grow. Has that cost-driven material sourcing strategy, has it pushed my network to the breaking point? Right? Short-term shareholder focus, has it created challenges for us to create a sustainable supply chain? Both the way we source, the way we deliver, the way we manufacture, the way we distribute. Right? And because we are in the global network, has the entire collaboration, which we all are very fond of talking about, has it just remained a talk? Because we don't necessarily, especially in the manufacturing industries, from the OEMs all the way to the tier ends, maybe there is a lack of trust. So in the absence of that trust, everything that we talk just remains as a talk. So my point is, even though we know in the previous slide, as we kind of discussed, we know we want to achieve resiliency, we want to achieve visibility, we want to achieve transparency. Probably we are not able to achieve that in spite of our good intentions, is because we may be operating in a legacy paradigm where we still focus on some of the things which may need to be tweaked, not completely eliminated, but needs to be tweaked. And I believe efficiency and resiliency can coexist. With that as a basis, right now, how do we and how can the future of the supply chain kind of meet its objectives while delivering a significant business value, both in terms of resiliency and in terms of efficiency, right? It need not have to be mutually exclusive. And here is just a perspective, right? From the left-hand bottom corner to the right-hand top corner, what I'm suggesting here is, whether we like it or not, I believe the businesses would move and their supply chain is going to evolve from where they are today, which I'm calling it as kind of a tactical and the strategic steps, to the futuristic steps, right? If you look at, I have kind of divided the entire activities into, hey, the plan, the source, the make, and deliver. Now, I don't think it's a rocket science, right? All of us are very familiar who are supply chain practitioners and from the industry. They all understand these are all the 4 key pillars of the supply chain. So I've used that paradigm to illustrate how we believe at TCS the supply chain is going to evolve so that it is going to be in a much better place and position to face the continued uncertainties, right? So if you look at on the right-hand top corner, there are 3 things that I'm saying, which is, 1, the supply chain potentially is going to move towards the self-healing. It is going to operate under the paradigm of neural plant, right? And the supply chain has to recognize the elements of sustainability, the climate changes, the ability to reuse, repair, and recycle. So the entire supply chain itself is going to move into the concepts of the circular supply chain, right? I believe, in our view, this movement is going to be enabled by some of the core technology evolutions that some of us already happened and some of it is continue to happen. It's going to acquire new dimensions, right? For example, all of the things that I'm saying with advanced analytics, cloud, digital twin, blockchain, drones, etc. All of these you can potentially put in a metaverse, right? And now you're kind of adding a different dimensions to what you can achieve. So if you look at the bottom of this screen, I'm saying today, majority of our supply chain, even though we have done enough decent amount of automation, decent amount of collaboration, it's still human-centric and it's mostly reactive. And the last 24 months has proven that. And it's going to move towards the neural orchestration, kind of a proactive, right? So that's how we believe at TCS the supply chain is going to evolve. Now, the logical question is, it looks very nice on a piece of paper. So how do we see this happening? And I wouldn't say, and this is a recipe, but this is a perspective. How we are thinking is, first, at the bottommost, if you think, we have a physical supply chain which needs to be connected. Actually, let me talk from the other perspective. All of us in the supply chain, in the practice as practitioners, where do we want to spend our time? We probably would want to spend time on the topmost layer, which is the cognition. That means I know most of the activities have already been done, and I want to put my energy, my mind, my intelligence to make those final decisions. I've got three options. I'm going to figure out, compare all the pros and the cons. I'm going to focus and leverage my cognition to make the right decision. How do I do that? For me to do that, I have to be collaborative with all my stakeholders in my ecosystem. Remember, the ecosystem is just not the four walls of the organization. It is the suppliers, the trading partners, the 3PLs, the 4PLs, the customers, all of these guys. So for us to focus on the cognition, I better collaborate. How do I collaborate? The fundamental element that would allow us to collaborate is to connect it, right? So it's not a physical connection, which is absolutely a prerequisite. And to a large extent, being the global supply chain, most of the nodes across the world are connected physically. Now, with that, we have to leverage the power of that physical connection to move an information connection and create a collaborative network, which will allow us to, with a lot of trust, a lot of transparency, share information. From there, we utilize that particular information to develop new cognitions, right? And then, as a human mind, which is so precious, we all in the supply chain can focus on that. I believe, with reference to the previous slide where I said that the companies can move towards self-healing supply chain, can move towards circular supply chain. We believe with this kind of a setup where you have, even though I've tried to create kind of a three logically separated layers, but it's going to work closely together, right? The physical, the collaborative nature or the collaborative platform, and then the cognitive nature. Each of these is going to be one way, potentially, I expect the supply chain to evolve so that it can meet the different challenges that I believe is going to be continued to be thrown at, both from a macro and the micro perspective, things that are under our control and beyond our control, so that we will be in a little better position to address. The question is whether you're not going to fail. I believe we are going to fail. The definition of the resiliency is when you fail and fall, how quickly we can get up, how quickly we will be able to start operating. And that's how I'm seeing the future of the supply chain is going to be using this kind of a paradigm. We are going to be in a lot better position. Now, this is probably the last slide that I have to kind of close out my thought process. We believe the entire manufacturing is going to move towards what we define at TCS as the neural manufacturing paradigm. What does it mean? If you look at your own body, right, there are so many things that are happening at any given point of time, but there is no chaos. Everything seems to be well coordinated. Everything seems to be running against a plan, right? And how does that happen? It happens because there is something called as a brain that is working through all the nerves and making sure that entire thing is well synchronized, well connected in a good collaborative manner so that it all functions perfectly. We believe in the days to come, the manufacturing, both the manufacturing industry, everything within your organization and then outside, starts moving towards this neural manufacturing paradigm where things are going to focus on intelligence, connected, automated, adaptive, personalized, right? So, I mean, these things are going to believe there's going to be a paradigm shift. It may happen in 5 years, it may happen in 10 years, but that is the direction that is happening. And it is much needed because the disruptions will continue to happen. You will not be able to control. So hence, we will set ourselves with a paradigm which will allow us to operate through those disruptions, right? And we believe at the end of the day, the supply chain and the plants can start feeling, can start thinking for itself, can start acting itself. Right. So this is I had got few of these thoughts to share with you guys in terms of how at TCS we are seeing the future of the supply chain, especially as the world continues to be kind of surrounded with a lot of these disruptions. I would love to take any of those questions you guys have. Jason, back to you.
Thank you, Deepak. And I think those were some great insights. And unfortunately, we've had so much great information today. We're running a little behind, so we won't be doing Q&A on this session. We will do our best to answer those questions in the chat. But Deepak, thank you for your time. And